Okay, we're not going to keep the stalwarts who have managed to make it to the very end of this 4 days of the New York Produce Show and Conference any longer. Couple of closing thoughts of what I sort of got out of sitting here today. First, I felt pretty good because I think one of the themes that just sort of ran through every panel and every speech was the incredible importance of information, that we talked about sharing information by micro means, like individuals going through the fields and seeing things. And of course, that's very valuable, but it's unlikely that the world is going to get most of their information by personally going on tours. So, you know, having created events like this, magazines, websites, things like this, these are the tools through which information is really shared, and it's so important for people to be engaged with these. And I think for food service, this is a particular challenge when we're talking about fresh produce. When we talk about retail, retail is organized where there is at every single retailer in America a vice president of produce, and a produce buyer, and a produce merchandiser. And because of that, you have deep careers that people have dedicated solely to produce at retail. But on food service, the challenge is that many operations, most operations, do not have a vice president of produce or dedicated produce procurement teams. So you have people who are really split. And they question of whether they're going to pay very much attention to produce at all and read all these publications and come to the produce events is a very much an open question. The big national produce associations from time to time have had people from the food service operator categories become chairman. But what I've always noticed and what's so interesting is some individual, for some unknown and probably quite peculiar reason, becomes very interested. So I remember a guy from Hilton Hotels became chairman of the Produce Marketing Association years ago. And I asked him, I said, well, what made you become chairman of the Produce Association? You could have been chairman of the Bed Manufacturers Association or something else that Hilton buys. He was in charge of food, so he could have realistically gotten involved in other areas. He said to me, well, produce was about 10% of my purchases for the Hilton Corporation and around 90% of my headaches. So with that, and knowing some people who were involved in the association, he got involved and individually chose to become chairman. Unfortunately, I have to say several times when operators have become chairman, the next year the companies drop their membership in the association. Why? Because it's all a personal thing, because there's no line of succession like at retail there is, where there's a VP of produce and there's going to be a new VP of produce. If you're interested in produce, maybe you will become chairman of PMA, but the next guy, he's interested in wine. And this is, I think, for the food service operator sector, an important consideration to think about. There are loads of resources out there in terms of information. This conference is one of them, and those operators that are here, more power to you, because it shows you're reaching out to understand better. But it's also true that the world is filled with people that are not reaching out to understand. I think that's one of the major challenges we have to overcome. The second point that I got from this is the enormous importance, of course, of transparency and trust, and that it's really impossible to solve these problems unless we're willing to share information and trust one another. But I don't know that we discuss quite as much as I think would be helpful the real prerequisites to making that happen. And I think there's a business and a personal element. On the business side, you know, no matter what you say, no matter how much you talk, if in fact you're going to bid it out and just go with whoever's the cheapest bidder. That is not the kind of prerequisite or the condition under which trust really can develop and which really encourages transparency. If you're going to switch suppliers because someone is a nickel cheaper, that is not the kind of condition either that encourages people to share all their information. So I think on a business point of view, it's not enough to just say you want transparency and you want trust. You have to think about the kind of business commitments you're making to people that will make those people want to reciprocate. And I think on a personal level is actually more important than any of this. Rich mentioned to me at a dinner last night with different people, shippers and operators, and I had a dinner last night and we had growers and we had wholesalers and distributors and fresh cut processors. And what unites all these, and there were probably 50 dinners like that last night in this town, what unites all of this is these deep personal relationships of people you've worked with for decades and decades, and who know that they could pick up the phone and ask you for anything, and if there's any way you can do it, whether it is a problem specifically with business or finding an internship for their kid or whatever it may be, they just know that you're on their side. And I think that a willingness to engage in those kinds of deep personal connections is really what makes it possible in an industry that is so perishable, in situations so dramatically change, and due to weather and other forces beyond the control of anyone in the room, new changes have to be made, new arrangements must be made quickly. And I think that a willingness to engage on that kind of personal level to build those relationships is actually the strongest possible bond that can be created to help your own businesses thrive. And that is as much for a grower shipper who is going to need outlets, a distributor who needs to work with people on both sides and satisfy them on both sides, and an operator who wants to know that they're always going to be able to get the best that can be gotten at the best type of pricing, at the best type of service. So when I listen to this whole day, I'm proud that we created this forum, because it seems to me like this is one of those necessary prerequisite steps where people from different parts of the industry can sit here and shake hands and begin to know each other in a way different than they know when they only talk through a distributor, or even when they once in a while come across each other. This is the steps that begin the building of trust that allows the transparency to proceed, so that each individual here can advance his career, advance the interests of his company, and advance the industry as a whole. So if we made some little step forward in that, I'd say it's a day well spent. And I thank you so much for being part of it, and we hope to see you back next year. Thank you very much.